Well, hello all, and this is a sentence that I never thought I would get to say, although I always kind of wanted to be able to say it. Shiloh had returned to YouTube to tell her side of the story with what happened with Onision. The entire interview is still up on Chris Hansen's secondary channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, so if you would like to see the interview in its entirety, you can head over there and check it out. I obviously can't include most of it because, copyright, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the stuff that was said during the interview. Shiloh explains that she originally reached out to Oniisan to get relationship advice on the relationship that she was in, and when he had ended up contacting her back, she thought that it was pretty cool and thought that maybe he would be the type of person that would be able to get her situation and maybe they could have a friendship. Shiloh states that they had a friendship for about 8 or 9 months on the internet and they had talked pretty much every day, all day, and that Sky was also aware of this and most times in the background. She goes on to state that there wasn't anything outright flirtatious or sexual going on at the time and they didn't discuss being in a relationship, it was just a friendship. But she also explains that there were some things that were going on that she looks back on now and sees as kind of strange. One example that she gave was the fact that she was comfortable enough to sit in front of a camera with only her bra on and have conversation. She states that he never asked her to do this, but he made it okay for her to do it. And during that time of their online friendship, he did a lot of building her up and giving her self-esteem and making her feel good about herself. Shiloh goes on to explain that the first time that anything was ever discussed about a relationship was when Onision abruptly called her and said that he was divorcing Sky for her and said that he had fallen in love with her over the course of the past few months. Shiloh states that she was in Pennsylvania because she was doing fitness training for an upcoming tour, and Onision had contacted her and showed her the divorce papers stating that he was getting a divorce from Sky. Shiloh explains that she was really kind of shocked by this, but she thought, wow, this guy must really be in love with me to go through all this for me. And she explains that the boyfriend that she had prior was online, so she didn't really have a lot of experience in any kind of serious relationship. She explains that this is when Onision decided to come out to Pennsylvania to see her, and that her mother was actually supposed to be in the hotel, but unfortunately she had to have a surgery, and there was supposed to be another chaperone with Shiloh, but that ended up not happening, so she ended up being in the hotel by herself. And this is an interesting part of the story because it had been alleged that Onision flew her out to Pennsylvania in order for them to be able to hook up. She says that he did get his own hotel room, but he had the hotel let her into his hotel room, and within moments of him showing up, he started kissing her and they ended up sleeping together. She states that the police ended up showing up at the hotel because the hotel had alerted the police that Onision had camera equipment in the hotel room and they weren't sure what was going on with that. She states that the police didn't find anything going on that was wrong, but they did make her go back to Canada, and Onision was sent back home to Washington. She goes on to state that at the time she thought that the divorce papers were legitimate and only recently found out that they were fake papers. She stated that the hotel incident happened in December of 2011 and Onision had made his way to Toronto by January. She says that because of the career that she was in, she had a lot more control over her situation, and because she was upset with her mother and Onision had essentially pushed her mother out of the situation, that she had told her mother that she didn't want to talk to her anymore. Her management had got her a studio apartment in Toronto, but she ended up spending all of her time with Onision in the apartment that he had acquired in Toronto. Chris then goes on to ask her when the relationship started to essentially turn on its head and he became more manipulative. She states that she had found Sky's sister's pictures on his computer when they were still living in Toronto and she confronted him about it. He admitted that he was doing things to those pictures and it caused her to have a breakdown. She goes on to state that he ended up coddling her and trying to make it okay, and then proceeded to show her the other material that he was doing things to, and one of the first things that he had shown her was an anime character getting and then states that the rest of the material that he was using was of anime characters that were very young looking and very flat chested. She states that she was very much not comfortable with this, but he explained to her that it didn't have anything to do with her and it was just a thing that guys do. And with her being young and not having very much experience in the subject, she just kind of said okay. She goes on to say that they were intimate about 8 times a day, and in between that time, if he was not making videos, he was recreationally doing things alone. She explains that she had frequent UTIs and was in pain a lot, and that these encounters were aggressive to the point where he had pulled her hair back so hard that it caused her to not be able to breathe, and that he would also use very derogatory language towards her during these times. But she states that since she didn't have much experience in this area, that she just thought that it was normal. She said that for her, she thinks at the time that she felt like she was in love with him, but looking back, she doesn't think that he has the ability to be in love with somebody, and that it was very much about lust and control. She states that he never outright asked her to end her career or stop doing music, but he did very much so take her away from it and took her away from her support system and all of her friends and family. She says that the night before her 18th birthday, they were waiting in a hotel room, and on her 18th birthday, he promptly flew her to Seattle, and with her missing more and more things that she was supposed to be doing, eventually the record label basically gave up on her. She then goes on to describe their living situation, saying that the living room was basically just a giant green screen, and that the kitchen was always a mess because he was making videos with food and such, and that the bedroom was just a mattress on the floor and a television and gaming systems. But he had an office space, and that was the space that was decked out with all of the cool things. Chris then goes on to ask her about the head shaving incident, and she said initially it was set up. She said that she had wanted to look like Skrillex, so they had planned a video where she was pretending to be asleep in the car and he would shave half her head, but later on during one of their intimate encounters, Onision had stated that he wanted her to shave her head and took her into the bathroom. He proceeded to shave her head in the bathtub and continued to have an intimate encounter with her, and then he wanted her to proceed to make YouTube videos acting as bald characters, one of which being the Avatar The Last Airbender video, and she also stated that he wanted her to play as Lex Luthor. Chris then mentions that it seems like Onision very much enjoyed ending Shiloh's career and then exploiting her in further YouTube videos, again drawing on the entire control aspect. Chris then goes on to ask her about the entire seizure situation, and she explains that it was during a time where they were being intimate, and then afterwards Onision had taken her to the shower, and he had told her that she was overweight and clinically obese and that she needed to lose weight because he couldn't lift her up during their intimate encounters, and that instead of her body type, he much more preferred smaller Asian descent women. She explains that she began to hyperventilate and shake in the shower, and Onision had left her there, and she's not entirely sure how she ended up from there to the side of his desk, but it did cause her to lose a good chunk of her memory, and she states that as far as she is aware, she thinks that it was a grand mal seizure, and that he had videotaped it at the time instead of calling for any kind of medical attention. She explains that she agreed to have it posted on the internet because Onision said that it might help somebody else, but she states that she has been having seizures ever since. She then goes on to explain that she was locked out of the bathroom in his office while he was doing things recreationally alone, and that she would sometimes cry beside of him in the middle of the night, and he would kick her out of the bedroom and lock her in the hallway to sleep. She states that there were a number of times where she would try to leave the house, but she wouldn't get very far because she didn't have any other resources, but she did want out of the situation. But she also states that her loyalty is very strong, and she kept thinking that maybe things would get better, so she kept coming back, and everything ended up being turned around to be her fault, so she thought that maybe if she was better, then the situation would be better. She states that after the first breakup, Onision had called the police on her and had her sent to a mental facility, but the nurse there had allowed her to call her mother, and she ended up going home. And after things did not work out with Adrian, he began calling her again and stated that he had made a terrible mistake and that he was in love with her, and at the time she she didn't want to be in her current living situation, and she thought, well, maybe he saw what it was like to be without me and he really does love me. So she decided to return, and upon her return he took her to pick out her own engagement ring. She explains that the second time that she had come back was when she ended up getting pregnant, and Oniisan was very much for it. And she recalled that one of the very first things that he had ever said to her was that he wanted to get her pregnant. She said that she wanted to have a natural birth, so they ended up getting a midwife, and that they got blood work done and an ultrasound, but eventually it came back that the baby was no longer alive. She states that the mental torment did not stop while she was pregnant, and it almost seemingly got worse. She states that that is when the midwife told her that she was in danger of going septic, and she ended up Googling it all on her own. And she said because Oniisan did not want to pay for her health care, he ended up sending her back to Canada, and that was essentially the last time that they had broken up. She states that she had ended up not going back to Oniisan because her mother had taken her passport out of her bag while she was in the hospital dealing with the pregnancy, and that she had blocked any attempt that Shiloh made to get a new passport. She also stated that she thinks if she would have went back, she would have ended up committing suicide in Oniisan's house, and to me that was an extremely heartbreaking thing to hear. She states that she did again get pregnant shortly after her and Oniisan had broken up, and it was explained to her that after she had had a DNC, it was extremely easy for her to get pregnant again. But she goes on to explain that she was not cheating on Oniisan because he had broken up with her the moment that he had sent her back to Canada, and that was whenever he released his Goodbye Shiloh video. She goes on to state that she never really spoke out about it because of all the backlash that she got from Oniisan fans. She said that after the first breakup, she went through 1,500 messages of people telling her to kill herself, and this is very reminiscent of what happened with Sky and her family and why they essentially left social media. And I could tell when she was talking that it seemed very much like a relief and a pleasant surprise that people were taking her side and she could finally tell her story. And it does seem like a lot of people are not saying their side of the story because they feel like they are going to get a lot of backlash. And again, these are all alleged incidents, but it is just my observation. Oniisan did end up emailing Chris Hansen during the course of this live stream, and in these emails he was calling out Chris Hansen's journalistic integrity, saying that he needed to address all sides of the story, and sending him the articles that he had written on Twitter and stating that all of these people are proven liars. To which Chris Hansen restated that Oniisan was welcome on the show to state his side of the story. And of all the alleged stories that have come out about Oniisan and all the controversy that has been surrounding him, this story was always the most prominent to me. It is what made me initially start looking into the situation, and it is still one of the hardest ones for me to listen to. I myself have been in similar situations, and I know how a relationship can change the course of everything for a person. I'm glad to see Shiloh getting back out there and doing her singing again and looking a lot better, and I just wish the best for her, for Sarah, for Billy, for anybody else that's been involved. And again, these stories are the alleged stories from the alleged victim's point of view, but one thing that is very interesting to me is how Oniisan is conducting himself lately. In the past, we have seen him troll or come out with a multitude of hateful videos or quote-unquote proof videos, or maybe just essentially ignore a situation altogether. But in this instance, he has went from making parody videos and trying to discredit these people to now emailing Chris Hansen and all of his team and saying very strange things like put my name in the title and you'll get more views, and sending him big blog posts that he has made. He has made very giant posts on not only his Patreon but also on Kai's Patreon, and now has proceeded to make crazy rants on Twitter, which we will get into in the next video. There is a lot of information all at once around this subject, and I'm trying my best to keep up with it and make videos. videos, so if you would like to see those, you can go ahead and subscribe. You can also leave your comments below, but I'm gonna end this video here because it's getting a little long and I'm off to finish editing, so for now, I'm out.